Good evening. My name is Tony, the world's case medic, and today I'm going to cover, did I say today? I mean this evening. It is 2200 here in Turku, Finland, where I am for this Christmas. Anyhow, I'm making a video on something I've been struggling to present in because it's about hyperventilation syndrome. And that's a complaint that, oh God, another one of those. That's what you think when you hear that call. Well, the call comes down occasionally as a panic attack. It comes down occasionally as hyperventilation, but most of the time it comes down as something else involving a trouble breathing. The reason this complaint is so fraught with risk is if the impression that you get when you hear this call is of a panic attack, which is the unofficial name for acute hyperventilation syndrome or something similar, you tend to kind of start excluding stuff in your mind before you get there and actually figure out what's going on. This is a real danger because panic attacks or hyperventilation syndrome can look a lot like a couple of other conditions that can kill you dead. I've personally helped a well-known and very good medic who almost lost his credentials and who knows what other trouble because of a patient he ran. It was assumed it was a panic attack because she was anxious, yes, because she was dying. She was breathing fast, yes, because she was dying and trying to compensate. And yes, it was sudden onset. As it turns out, it was a pulmonary embolism, which does the same thing. So 3 questions I'm going to show you or would help me to figure out, first off, if it's likely to be a panic attack. The second question or check is to kind of rule out, as well as possible, lethal problems that can disguise themselves as a panic attack. And the third question is kind of the clincher because no other condition acutely presents this way. Here we go. First question, easiest question on earth. Ask the patient, have you ever had this before? Have you ever been diagnosed with a panic attack? Have you been told you have anxiety attacks? Does this feel like an anxiety attack to you? If the patient's so spazzed out they can't tell you, ask their family. They almost always have someone there with them, friends, who will know this. So you kind of get a history. Instead of inventing the wheel from scratch, let the patient's history be a huge guide. People who have panic attacks almost always have a history of previous panic attacks. I'll admit that I had a panic attack when I was a young Marine facing getting married and was freaked out. I didn't know it was a panic attack. I just walked around panting all night long and had no idea what the hell was going on. Thought I was going to die, but was too proud to call for help. Plus, it was in the 80s, and who called 911 back then? So only later I realized what I had was a panic attack. Next question. This is the kind of safety question, the safety check. And while you're asking the patient the other questions, you should be getting this anyways. Get a pulse ox reading. A pulmonary embolism may present just like a panic attack, except for the saturation will be too low to fit the picture. If you have a genuine panic attack, the pulse ox should be pegged at 100 for 2 reasons. One, the person having a panic attack will likely have an increased minute volume, which means they're breathing faster or deeper or both. That's going to maximize oxygen uptake. The second reason is if they are in some sort of respiratory alkalemia or even alkalosis, which is what precedes alkalemia, that will cause a rightward shift in the oxygen hemoglobin disassociation curve, which means more oxygen will be stuck to the red blood cells, to the hemoglobin, pushing that level even higher. So you should have basically 100 or at least 98, 99, 100. Key point, make sure the pulse ox capture is good. If you have a plethysmograph on your monitor, which the Zols and Life Assist or Life Packs do, make sure the waveform matches the pulse rate, matches the EKG. If the waveform is all over the place or garbage, then your pulse ox reading is no good. If you only have one of those pulse oxes with a fingertip, it'll usually have a little bar that goes up and down that matches the heart rate. Make sure it matches. If those don't match, your pulse ox is garbage. Finally, the secret sauce question, and that is checking for signs of hypocalcemia. What? Carpal pedal spasms, perioral tingling, and numbness? Yes, those are signs of hypocalcemia. if you go into respiratory alkalemia, as the pH of the blood goes up, that causes free calcium ions in the blood to be taken up by the blood protein albumin. Just as a side note, albumin is the major protein that holds fluid within the blood vessels. Sodium is a major electrolyte, and I think albumin is actually more powerful, if you want to put a strength contest, than the sodium. This calcium uptake into the albumin leads to hypocalcemia, and I said hypocalcemia, which is just in the blood, and it's relative because the calcium is actually there, it's just kind of busy elsewhere, and that leads to increased activity or sensitivity of the nervous system, of the muscles, the nervous system's control, of the sensory nerves that the nervous system is comprised of, and so that's where you'll get those Trousseau sign, the tingling of the lips, sometimes cramping, and in the really, really bad cases, actually can lead to like whole body, almost a tonic seizure. I've seen that once. The SpO2 on capno was about 15 or 14 on that patient. Now, I didn't mention capno. Why? Because a low capno happens in a lot of conditions. It will happen in panic attacks, but not necessarily. It will happen in pulmonary edema, which is CHF caused a left-sided heart failure, CHF/pulmonary edema. It will happen in sepsis. It will happen in asthma. It will happen in pulmonary embolisms. It will happen in significant pneumothorax, spontaneous tension, whatever. It will happen in aspirin overdose, acetylsalicylic acid overdose. It'll happen in DKA. In short, a low capno is about as non-specific as crap. And even if you use capno to measure respiratory rate, if the capno waveform is too low, it really won't even be counted accurately. You really got to use your own two eyeballs and brain and count the respiratory rate. 15 seconds should be more than enough to get an estimated count because they're breathing fast, they're breathing regularly. All right, so to close, if you get a breather, a person, whatever the complaint is, and your first assumption is panic attack, that should be thrown in the garbage. You should always start out with the worst case scenario in mind. But 3 easy ways to check is, again, check for a prior history of this complaint. If it's looking like a panic attack, anxiety attack, ask them, have you ever had a panic attack, anxiety attack before? Has it been diagnosed? Yada, yada. Does this feel like the same thing? Ask the family if the patient's freaking out and can't tell you. Check the SpO2 while you're doing that. I mean, you get to all the other vital signs too, but these are the ones that really count. The SpO2 should be pegged high, and good capture to confirm this reading as being accurate. Finally, you can usually see it, but sometimes they don't show it right away. It all depends on the person and other factors. Do they have signs of hypocalcemia? The tetany in their hands, spasms, numbness, tingling, lightheadedness, these things like that, and or even up to including spasms. And this should keep you in the solid position of identifying what is likely a panic attack if those things are present. Thank you.